I'd like to welcome everybody. To a Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I'm not going to have a mic. This is going to be pretty low key, but welcome to our new space here at Industrious North Loop. My name is Lynn Wehrman. I'm president and founder of Micro Accessibility Services. We've been doing these events for, what is this, our 4th year. And some of you may have gone to some of the events. We started out doing them with Clockwork Interactive. They moved on to some different things. And so this is kind of our first hand of doing it on our own. And it's pretty fun. We're also live streaming via Zoom and recording. And we have live captioning. We'd like to thank our partner, Caption Access, for providing that. They do all of our internal captioning for our trainers and everything, and so it's great to have them on board. We're really glad that you took the time on this gorgeous evening to be with us for a little while. WeCo is a mission-based for-profit company started by myself and some other digital accessibility professionals. Stemmed from work that I used to do in the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Realizing that I grew up with a disability in a family of generations of people who live with cognitive disabilities, and working in government on MnDOT's American Disabilities Act transition plan, I really saw the power of how effective people living with disabilities could be when they were brought to the table and consulted about their own accessibility. So it's where the concept of the company came from, and the people that I met while working at MnDOT who also live with disabilities, we came together to form this company. And so how we work is that currently all of WeCo's accessibility specialists live with one or more disability. And in order to test, do usability testing for WeCo, you have to live with a disability, which we always joke with our testers that if you ever become not disabled, you're out of a job. So, because we really believe that that is the service that we bring to organizations, is the ability to put together that team for you, because it is incredibly hard for even big organizations to do that on their own. So that's just a little bit about us. Global Accessibility Awareness Day is an international effort that was actually just designed by a handful of people. It started a while ago by just a few people who thought it was important to draw attention to the digital accessibility needs of people who live with disabilities. And it's really caught on worldwide. So we are listed on a big international website of a bunch of different events. So realize that you're celebrating with people all over the world. Really believe that this is important and want to support it and make it happen. This year, I thought it would be really important to highlight some of the amazing people that we have right here in the Twin City area that have been working on digital accessibility. Many of you come to the Accessibility Twin Cities meetup that WeCo started and co-sponsors. A lot of these folks I meet every other month, and it's really exciting to see how that meetup that started 2 years ago, the knowledge and the growth and the wealth of information that's becoming amassed in about 300 members of that meetup in the last 2 years. Some of the people that I've met too are people that WeCo works with directly. So tonight, we're going to showcase a couple of organizations and what they're doing. And what I think is fun about this is the panel includes somebody from the nonprofit sector and somebody from the public sector. And for those of you that work on accessibility, you know that those efforts can be really different depending upon the type of agency that you're in. And so it's going to be fun to be able to pick the brains of these two individuals, regarding how they got going, what the challenges have been. So I'm going to introduce our panel. First of all, we have Amy Ludtke with Hennepin County Library. She is the acting coordinating librarian for web and online services for the library. She has been with the library for almost 20 years, working in a variety of roles, services, librarian, branch manager, and then web and online services librarian. One of her areas of focus for the website has been usability testing, and they are currently working with us right now on that. And she has a master's in library science from the University of Iowa. One fun thing about me is that she is an amateur actress, and she's going to be in a play June 14th at Dreamland Arts in St. Paul.
I got that little play.
And our other panelists is somebody I've come to know well for our meetups is Theresa West. Theresa is, I'm not sure what APTOS, accessibility program you're using.
Oh, I use those acronyms all the time. TOS, it's our Technical Operations Services, so it's really the IT department. One of the IT department. So that's the accessibility field.
So she has had a variety of career experiences from product development to management to lead roles in the tech sector, connecting technology to making things easier and better for people. The fun thing about her is that she loves to travel. She's lived and worked overseas for several years. She loves to cook, and apparently she's getting better at it, so we're all going to go to her house afterwards.
Yes.
I just thought that for starters that I would let each of you introduce how you found yourself working in accessibility. I know you've given me that information, but Amy, do you want to start out?
Sure. And as you probably could tell from my introduction, my experience and background isn't as a developer, so I won't be speaking to the sort of technical side as much. But I started working as a web and online services librarian about 8 years ago. And even when I started with our department, we were very concerned with accessibility, working with accessibility. At that time, we were really thinking about like alternative text, content, plain language, and our developers were also thinking about, the coding side of things, and making sure that code and the HTML and some quality guidelines. So for us, it's really been, I guess, kind of a long journey, something that's ongoing. We certainly think it's going to continue to be ongoing. We want to get better and better at it. And so when I started in the web and online services department, I rather quickly got involved with usability testing, which we were just starting to focus on. And Amy Dreyer was working with us at that time on that as well, and was one of the people instrumental in helping us get that off the ground. Before that, we had done it a little more infrequently. And so it was kind of a combination of just, I think, the world in general becoming more aware about digital accessibility as a legal requirement, as a service requirement, and then us having staff that's coming in. Amy, our primary website developer who wasn't able to make it today, Stephanie Rosso, which some of you may know, perhaps from the meetups or other events. When she came to us about 3 years ago, she brought a wealth of accessibility knowledge and expertise, so that really sort of helped us take things to the next level. And then we started working with Miko, I think officially in August of last year. And, it was just a kind of a time when everything came together and we were really ready to make our efforts more focused and really looking to get that piece talked about working with people who live with disabilities and getting disability testing and feedback from that perspective.
Theresa, how did you get here?
Well, even though I work in the IT division of US Bank, one of them, I'm not a developer. I did manage a group of business analysts who wrote requirements, and I managed this group both, and we worked on our usbank.com website. And the way that we got started was first I had a manager who asked me to work on a special project, and that project was to help resolve some defects, accessibility defects from this project. And I just got really involved in it and really enjoyed it, and then started the learnings, or took the learnings from that and brought it over to .com, usbank.com, sorry, that's a nickname we call it. And we, at the time, were moving to a new platform, a new publishing platform, and rebranding. And this was about 4 years ago. And that led to be a gateway for our accessibility. Because as you can imagine, in a big organization, and I'm sure some of you are from big organizations, but the websites, can have a lot of stuff in them, thousands and thousands of pages. So in order to tackle it, we had a new platform, a new branding effort, and that is when we made that transition to make everything going on that platform accessible. And it was new to our group, our developers, our user experience folks, our designers, our testers, our developers. And so the business line engaged a third party that helped us and trained us and guided us for this first effort. And it continues to, each phase continues even today to transition everything over to be accessible. And that's just one project of many, as you can imagine. I mean, we have, online banking services, we have online application, where you can imagine all the digital assets that a bank might have. And we have different pockets that are much more advanced than others in terms of accessibility, but our company is committed to it. And in my new role, which I just took on last year, it was to put together a plan to help our IT folks become more fluent or more confident in accessibility. So there's a lot of moving pieces that I put together, like training and automated tools for testing accessibility, manual tools and things of that nature to help all the different groups work in concert to deliver accessible digital assets.
So there's some real differences, compare and contrast between the two organizations. But I'm wondering next if you, both of you, we'll start with Amy, could pinpoint any unique challenges or circumstances that made pursuing accessibility easier or harder?
Well, one thing I'll say that I probably should have said in the introduction is, and I think this makes us a little unique, is that we are a government entity and we're part of the Hennepin County government umbrella. So that makes us unique, and it's mostly an asset because Hennepin County as a whole is also very committed to accessibility. And again, we have on one hand, we have legal responsibilities to make sure our content is accessible, and then also service mission level inspiration, I guess. So one thing that first comes to mind about what makes accessibility challenging for us, and I don't know, perhaps everyone feels this is true for their website, but we have rather complex services and information that we're trying to provide, and again, services that we're trying to provide can be just a little challenging to explain, whether it's, and I'll try not to get too deep in the library world, but, you know, let's say we're trying to explain to people about our borrowing policies or interlibrary loan, and doing that in plain language can be really challenging. Another challenge that comes to mind is we work with a lot of different vendors to provide our services. Our catalog is probably the biggest one that comes to mind. So we certainly, you know, put a priority on working with vendors who provide accessible service, but that can just be an ongoing challenge.
Well, I think one of the things that's really challenging for a large organization is simply because it's so large. I mean, I started out the program last year by doing an inventory assessment of the different digital assets that we had and the potential scope of things that were already in production maybe years ago that, you know, were not accessible. So that kind of gave us a baseline, and looking at that, it's quite a huge endeavor, right? So we're breaking it down into pieces to make it more manageable, and we have been doing accessibility for years, and we are looking for those opportunities where maybe when you're switching to a new platform, that is your big, you know, pivotal point to start really making sure everything is accessible. It's a lot easier than trying to read something that's very complex, Amy said. But nonetheless, we have efforts going throughout the organization with accessibility. And I think one of the unique things that has recently happened at the bank is we have an accessibility user experience group. And they also have accessibility specialists, native screen readers as part of our user experience group. So they really lent a lot of direction and support for ensuring that we're delivering accessibility in our designs and wireframes and concepts and, you know, layouts, screen lights, everything like that. So, and we work in lockstep with them. And so we're moving to DevOps. I don't know if any of you are from the technology field, but you know, there's a lot of different changes, like starting with Agile, and now we're moving to DevOps and safe Agile. So a lot of those things require that we work a lot of us. And so we need to make sure that everybody is really working in tandem and very well trained to keep that train moving, if you will, at the speed that the company needs to. So those are some unique challenges that I see.
It sounds like both organizations did considerable amount of planning to get here. Would you say that that's true?
Yes.
Okay. Just wondering, in that process of planning, were there some perhaps startling or gaps that surprised you, or, you know, were there any you know, as you got into it, what was the thing that you didn't expect, that you had to play catch up on, or for us at WECO, we see a lot of organizations that, except we actually were just talking about this in the public relations meeting, that there is kind of this, we're discovering that there's kind of this belief that IT departments know it all, and that we shouldn't have to train our staff, because we're actually, our sales staff is struggling with every proposal that we give out. The client asks us to chop off the training, and we often say to our clients, we're going to train you one way or the other. We'll either train you in the classroom, or you're going to buy a bunch of consulting hours and ask us a million questions. But, you know, that's one thing that we find, that one of our board members, who's a former business analyst for American Express, said that it's pretty common for big companies to assume that IT departments know it all and don't get training.
I mean, do we have any developers in the group? You know, I don't want to make a generalization, but I think developers really kind of discover on their own. They really take initiative to go out and learn. And I agree with you to a certain degree. I'm a huge proponent of training because I know that is essential for knowing and understanding the WCAG guidelines. And so I hear what you're saying, and I think that might be true to a certain degree, but our company is big on training, so.
Well, I'm just wondering, along that line, is there anything as you go on this process that you found out that was a gap that you needed to meet, that your organization wasn't prepared to meet?
I don't know if it's that as much, but going along with something you said earlier about, I guess, expectation. There maybe can be that expectation to work against that accessibility work, and often website work, I think they go along together, are just sort of, it's just one-time work where it's really, ongoing. Yeah. And it's not like a one-time, we just made this accessible and now we're done. Because you all know there's so many pieces and it's always changing and everybody's always learning. So I feel my colleagues and coworkers and everyone has been really supportive, but it can just be a little challenging to communicate with how it's ongoing and how things that many of us aren't aware of. If we aren't living with a disability, or we're not familiar with screen readers or other assistive technology, and we look at a website, we're just not aware of so many things, and maybe don't realize work that's happening that's very important, but that may not result in a evident difference to many people.
That's interesting.
I agree too with what you just said in terms of, it's not a one and done. You roll out the website, it's accessible, because you're having changes almost every day in some cases, and that regression testing, and you need to keep on the forefront to keep it accessible, and so that is sometimes a challenge depending on the product and who you might have authoring the pages. They might be from a different marketing group or commercial government group or something, and you have to remember that they all need to be trained on accessibility as well, so that when they author those pages, they get that alt text in there and they are using the right labels and content and such. So
I'll maybe just add that for me a challenge in my role is communication, and to make sure that I'm communicating clearly and well with people so that they can understand what we're trying to accomplish, why we're doing the things we do, and it can be challenging when I'm not a developer, I don't have the same tech skills, and then I may also be, I guess maybe sometimes this is positive, but I'm communicating with staff who also don't have that same technical background, so there's lots of opportunities to increase my communication skills and just effectively working with colleagues. And again, I think you asked about maybe what a strength that our organization had. People my colleagues and administration are very, very receptive to the goals of accessibility. It's just, helping people understand what we're doing and why.
I think a theme that I'm kind of hearing here is that both organizations are really committed to accessibility and that it's something that you recognize as ongoing. So how do you handle things like staff turnover? And, how do you keep that legacy alive and keep it, that I think is really interesting. So how do you grow that culture of accessibility?
That is a very good question. And I'm thinking back again to when I started in web and online services, that there was already a commitment to accessibility. I, as a new staff person in that area, was really encouraged to do self-learning and attend local workshops and, just a wide range of things. So, and now I'm thinking in my kind of current, relatively new role as a manager. So thank you, that's a good question to ask. It's a good goal for me to be focusing on. But yes, just to keep it encouraging that. We also have an accessibility strategy document for our website, which is very helpful. It really lays down our core principles about what we're trying to do and how we're going to accomplish it. So I think that strategy document is going to be very helpful as we move forward.
So a couple of things that we're doing, and communication is a big challenge, especially in any organization. And we've started conducting what we call quarterly roadshows, where I will go and my partners in user experience accessibility and the accessibility office who establishes policies. We go, for example, to a city where we have a big contingency of people, and we conduct these educational seminars with them, and we explain what we're doing and why it's so important, and talk about how it should work in a project, the value stream. And we have also started a center, a sort of excellence or a community of practice. And again, pulling from all different parts of our enterprise, because it's pretty big, and there are a lot of different IT departments and different user experience departments. And so we had our first kickoff, in fact, last month with this community practice. We established a SharePoint site where we share articles and information. And, we're talking about how can we standardize across the enterprise on, requirements and coding practice and different tools and training, so that we're all learning and hearing and using, the same language. So those are a couple of things that we initiated to help communicate that.
That sounds really ambitious and admirable. Great. I know that we're kind of coming towards the end of the panel time, and I do want to give some time for the audience to ask questions, but I have one that I was dying to ask tonight that I know we grapple with as an accessibility company. Has your organization found any return on investment yet on accessibility? And if so, how do you track and measure?
Maybe I'll jump in. So I think in the nonprofit world, that has a slightly different flavor for us. I mean, we're always really interested in the impact that we're having and how we measure that, but I think it's a little bit different than how the profit world does. But one thing we know is that when we make our services, particularly our website, more accessible, we're really making it better for all of our users. And kind of getting back to my earlier comments about the complexity of the services and information we're trying to provide, the easier we can make that for any user to use and understand, the more impact we're having. We're really meeting our goals then. And again, it's something that we're committed to. It's something that the Hennepin County is committed to. I was just at a great meeting yesterday. We were talking about plain language and how that really benefits everyone. So I think that's
absolutely. And it definitely for an organization that is public driven and government is, the ROI is going to look different, right? So did I put you on the spot with this, Theresa?
I mean, I could say, well, you know, the ROI model that I think a lot of people use in technology, but it's kind of getting worn out, is return on investment when you do it right the first time, or you catch those defects upstream as opposed to downstream in QA or something in production, heaven forbid, right? So there's that ROI, but I think truly what I see in the people I work with in accessibility throughout my company is people take a lot of pride in making sure that our websites are, online banking, all the stuff that's out there, we make sure it's accessible for everyone so that people can read the same content, they can perform the same functions, everybody regardless of ability. So to me, that's, that goal is really where that ROI comes into play and what we aim for. So
it's really gratifying for me, that, because I think, when I started the company 8 years ago, and we were, pitching to our first companies, it was always, we can't justify that cost. And, both of you have said, how do you measure a cost in which it just includes everybody? So thank you. It's wonderful to hear that. So I think we're going to open up the floor for a few minutes. Is there anything you're dying to ask the panelists? Go ahead. We're going to have to ask everybody to project because we have no microphones.
I'll do my best. Thanks. Perhaps a question more for Hennepin Library. Do you have any experience or insights or things that you can share about the accessibility of educational content? In your content, there's a training aspect to it, it's interactive.
So the question was if Amy and the library had any experience with making educational content accessible.
Yeah, I think that does go back to the larger question about our vendors and making sure that we're in conversation with them about the importance of accessibility. We do, I'm not sure if this is quite what you're asking, but we do make sure that we provide content that is at a wide range of reading levels. Thinking specifically about like some of our online resources. We have things that, are for, they're aimed at younger students or for reading level that maybe goes up to 5th grade. But that can be very valuable for adults too. So we try to present it in a way where we make the reading level easy to find out, but we also don't present the resources this is very juvenile and childish, which I think is helpful because, many adults need or want content that's at that more accessible reading level.
I might be able to answer this a little bit better for you because it just turns out that WECO has been working with a number of vendors that create classroom material. And most recently, we've started to test for vendors that are selling to the Texas Education Association. We've been filling out TE reports, TEA, and so we're working. We just finished up a manual accessibility audit for an online learning program software, which we've done those through the years. Now we're starting to do them specifically to meet education requirements. But the most interesting one that we got to do is that we got to do a learning CD for grade school. So we're literally and at that point, Sue Ann and I were sharing an office, and I'm plugging in the CD, and we're doing little learning songs, and I'm going, okay, we got to figure out how to make this accessible. And what's kind of the fun frontier about that for us is that these vendors come to us and they go, okay, we know we've got to do the TA report. We have no idea what that means. We have no idea how do we translate that to a learning CD. And our accessibility team researches it and figures it out. So in that instance, it really wasn't that hard because all we thought about is how do we make this accessible? Well, we need to come up with lyrics so that somebody can access the lyrics. We need the lyrics to be in a format that is digitally accessible and can translate to Braille. And being the document specialist that can do that, build up the TA reporting. Vendor was really happy because they just didn't have a clue. And though it was new to us, as Sue Ann Rodriguez always says, if it's digital, we can figure it out. We can analyze it. If it's digital, we've got it. And so that stuff is actually kind of fun for us. So does that give you some information? Yeah. Okay. And feel free to talk to me or Sue Ann if you have more questions. Anyone else? Question? Go ahead.
What would you say is the number one pain point for us achieving your accessibility goals?
Number one pain point or obstacle to achieving accessibility?
Well, I'll jump in on this one. I mean, I think when you're in a large organization, competing priorities is a big deal. Something that comes out that's shiny and new, got to have it. It's going to drive this kind of revenue or that, whatever. Those are the challenges. So I would recommend that your accessibility program be right at the C-suite level so that you don't have to worry about competing with those other priorities because you're right up there with security, performance, features, what have you. I'm going to say we're learning that lesson. So,
yeah, and I think I'll just go back to some comments I made before about effectively communicating to people why we need to do or not do some things that we are doing. So, because, I think everyone has the best of intentions, but, if they want something on the website or part of the website that doesn't meet accessibility guidelines, standards, just helping them understand that so it just doesn't seem like some strange, arbitrary decision I made or someone made.
There's a question over here.
Yeah. So you talked about, just right out of what you said, the importance of communication, not just for accessibility, but also for the training aspect that you were mentioning. As a trainer with a UX background, would you share how do you sell that? How do you sell that, the importance of that?
How do you sell the importance of training, of accessibility?
Of accessibility training? Well, we have a pretty strong organizational commitment to training, so we're lucky it really fits into that very well. At least for people who are working directly with the website, either website content or development. I guess it might be a little more challenging if you're thinking more broadly about how to train or communicate with people throughout the organization who maybe aren't, contributing content or directly working on the website but are using it. So I don't know if you're thinking about training that broadly, but for our group of people who work directly on the website, we're just lucky that it's a priority for our organization and for the county. And we also have really good partnerships with people who work on the county website and accessibility for the county. And maybe just one quick thing I'll add is it's really helpful for us to tie digital accessibility and website accessibility into our larger priorities for inclusion and reducing disparities and diversity and inclusion work. So helping people make those ties, it just creates even more buy-in, more excitement about it.
Could you sort of repeat your question again? Because I had a different kind of thought tonight. Is it that your UX people, you can't get funding for the training, or they don't want to take the training?
Usually it's dismissed by the product committee.
Oh.
And then they worry about it at the very last minute.
Sure.
We should have been involved from the beginning.
Yeah. You know, that's a common thing when you're not training everybody in the group, especially like a PM or a Scrum Master, because they really are supposed to keep the project on task, right, and keep moving forward. I think one of the things that we have a policy, and so the bank says this is our policy, we do the right thing. That helps. The second thing is we have a user accessibility group, and they work with the user experience group, and they help emphasize why it's so important and what the alternatives are, because often the alternative, or making it accessible is better than where you might have started in a design or a layout or whatever. And I think once people get used to working in a partnership like that, it really goes a long way. At least that's what I've seen in our organization. And we started with the user accessibility group with native screen readers, and they get involved in the projects up front when we're starting with the design. And we always emphasize, do it up front with design, because that's really where a lot of the requirements come from, right? For accessibility, the content, the layout, the structure, the page structures, the labels, I could go on and on, but you know that, right? And so if you start up there, and if you're like, we use Agile. I don't know if you're using Agile as your methodology or Scrum, but we have a design review where we talk through it so the whole team hears about it, including the PM or the Scrum Master. So that helps. But I think training should be mandatory as part of if you're designing front end user interfaces, that training should be right up there if that's possible to convince your company. So,
I think I can probably just kind of wrap what we've seen around that, and that we've learned that people get on board with accessibility when they experience people with disabilities, and it starts to hit home. And so that's part of the reason that as a group of professionals who do digital, who live with disabilities, that we always do free events, because we know that if you can invite your boss to this thing, if you can drag him to this thing after work, and he can actually see not a developer who's kind of figured out how to do NVDA, but a woman with a master's degree in digital communication in the next room who uses JAWS every day. It's just a whole different thing. And sometimes that process can be very slow. But I think that the more that people get that exposure, the more they start to understand, I don't want to leave Sue Ann out. I mean, they start to get that where they understand that that's a real person. And I think that makes a big difference. We'll take one more question.
Can you talk a little bit about the legacy assets that you mentioned, in particular? Yes. Can you approach that?
Yeah, we have, that's a tough nut to crack, I have to admit, but we have made some progress on standalone PDFs, if you will, PDFs that have sort of static information where they're not being dynamically loaded from other sources. And we have it set up with a business line can engage different vendors to help them or do it themselves. But when
So you outsource some of that?
Yes, the business line it can absolutely go to a third party and have them, remediate or convert that PDF for them. Where we run into challenges is when we have, statements that have dynamic data that are fed maybe from a credit card. You get your credit card statement or, all the transactions. I've looked into, I've done a lot of research on. There really weren't good solutions yet, but that was a couple of years ago. But we continue to look at that, and that is where we're going to go in the future. But we do offer Braille and large print statements that we mail out as an alternative.
Well, I wish we could spend longer on that, but we have gone a bit over the panel, and we know that a number of you are here to see the demonstrations. One of the fun things that you get to see tonight is usual stuff like Suen demonstrating JAWS. But we have a conference from GAAD over there. We have Dane doing iPhone voiceover, and he's got it projected up onto a screen tonight. We have Chad in this room doing Dragon Naturally Speaking. We apologize we weren't able to get a screen up for him, so you have to look over his shoulder. And what am I missing? Maureen. Oh, this is awesome. So Maureen is in conference room C across the hall, and she is some of you guys have seen the Braille display, and you type your name in Braille. Well, she's got a new one, and it's hooked up to a screen, so it's going to be really fun. So, if you never did come to any of our demonstrations before, don't be shy. Walk in, start talking, look over the shoulder. These guys they'll look at your website for you if you want. And so, but just please feel free to help yourself to food. There's beer and bottled water in the fridge, and the rest of the evening is up to you. You just get to mix and mingle with our testers. So before we conclude, I just want to first of all say thank you to our wonderful operations team that does our setup, and to our public relations team that checks people in and greets people. And then I also want to say that this is the first year that WECO has actually had an official event coordinator, Andy. And Andy has done just a wonderful job. He's made it a whole lot easier for us. So thank you so much for coming. We're going to be here for the next hour and a half. So take your time, get some demonstrations. Oh, and our event photographer, Jana, who did this as a volunteer, actually flew in from Philadelphia to photograph us. So really excited. But thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to our wonderful panel.